There we go. That should be live. Wait like 2-3 seconds. Make sure that everything is actually working appropriately. It's showing up for people. Why is that a gray screen on the preview? Let me also swap this over so I'm not hearing my own voice and I can actually hear what's on Premiere. Let's see. If this is working properly, you should be able to see a preview of the video in this sort of upper right quadrant here. I'm seeing some number of concurrent viewers, so that is excellent. That means we've actually gone live. Still looks gray in the corner. Well, I'm gonna push through that for now because it looks like there's not really anyone in chat to inform me of exactly how well this is working. But, so it's been like probably a year since I was last doing streaming. It's been a while. The long and short of that is basically my last apartment I was in had a very peculiar setup where they gave us complimentary Wi-Fi, which was great. Only the Wi-Fi was the closest thing to dial-up that I have experienced since dial-up, and we couldn't actually get service from anyone else. So I was a bit stuck there. Plus, going live is always a little bit stage fright inducing, so it always sort of drops it on my priority a little bit. Hey, there we go. Okay, I'm starting to see people. Gray block, great. Tone it down, getting too much adrenaline. Oh, yeah, this is gonna be the craziest, most wild stream you've ever seen. Gray block. That is. Perhaps I should have played around a little bit more with my settings. I know the things that I always look for is okay, is the audio input coming in right? Is it actually capturing the window? Is it streaming to the right place? Yada, yada, yada. This is something I have not encountered before. I don't think there's that many settings to go with this, though. I don't know why it would do that. I suppose one thing I could do, if this continues, I can just pull up the video in a new window and just stream that window. So that way, you can get the stuff, you can see the stuff that I'm talking about, which is kind of a shame because I was really hoping that I could do some of the actual technical behind the scenes stuff and show you how it's put together and the way some of the scenes look under the hood, but we'll improvise, adapt, overcome. Oh, would you look at that? I pull up YouTube and the first recommendation is my own live stream. That would be an interesting concept. We'll just, a live stream that is nothing but commentary on itself. I just pull up the Louis the 16th video. Got that as a backup. I don't know. I'm not sure what to do about this. It's a French gray block. There you go. Alright. We're going to have to make the unfortunate transition as I, in vain, attempt to scroll through my Premiere project in hopes that some of it will show up. Nope. Alas. Alright. We'll make this work. This is why no one joins streams right at the beginning, is because A, there's no announcement or any hype, and B, it's just any technical difficulties that are going to happen. You get to bear the brunt of them. Oh my god. For 1 second, I switched windows and I saw a gray box on YouTube as well. This was so cursed. Hey, Zephyrus is here. Welcome, welcome. So this stream is doing kind of double duty right now, because usually, well, the streams are, after the stream ends, I will unlist it and then put up the VOD recording on Patreon. And usually the behind the scenes stuff is like a captain tier perk. So this is going to be discounted. Let me make sure I've got my notes up. Oh, yeah, this first scene. All right. I've got to set up my... Can you tell it's been a year since I've done this, and I have to still set up my audio output capture to make sure that you can hear the things that are playing? All right. Shrink this down. And unmute it and make it not at 1% volume? Crazy. What a concept. I think it's still not coming out because it's coming out through the wrong audio source. I'd have to check that. Yeah, yep. Okay. At least I know how to fix this. Have it come out through the speakers instead.
Boy becomes a 15-year-old
Alright, there we go. Start this over from the beginning. Pretend like nothing ever happened. And try to watch chat at the same time. It's a challenge. Someone's asking what program I use for the videos. It's Premiere usually for me. I'm working with a couple other people who do a lot of work in After Effects, but that is my computer. Is just Premiere has the advantage of being able to scrub through and hear audio and like have it play really smoothly for the most part, whereas After Effects it just doesn't like, you have to like pre-render a lot of stuff to get it to work. Anyway, the sound should be fixed. I'm seeing messages in chat saying that it's not working. Oh, a bit loud. Okay, don't worry. We got it. We'll bring that down. The perks of stalling this out and checking chat before just jumping into it. Paint slideshow. Oh, God. That's a way to make videos. Yeah. I say as though, like, casually explained isn't a thing. 1770. The future of France rests on the shoulders of a young Louis Auguste, recently named heir after the untimely demise of his brother and father. And today, there's an interesting thing going on with the music in these videos that I don't know if... I think, like, one person in the comments pointed out that I was, like, so happy to hear, is that there's sort of, like, a gradual transition from... I think, what is this, Bach or something? It's definitely Baroque. Yeah, it's Bach at the beginning. So like at the start of this one, pre-revolution, you've got all of these like, Baroque pieces. They're very like fancy, highfalutin, courtly, aristocratic music. And then as like the revolution starts, it transitions into more and more like, Mozart-y, like classical music until eventually the revolution gets out of control. And you end up with, like, Robespierre is getting his head cut off and, like, running from the law. And you've got, I think, like, Gustav Holst's Planets series. You've got, like, Mars, Bringer of War, and Beethoven's Eroica for Napoleon, which was actually, like, written for Napoleon because Beethoven had, like, a huge, crush on Napoleon until Napoleon started doing very authoritarian things, and Beethoven kind of like retconned that piece and is like, no, this is not about Napoleon at all, definitely not. Anyway, just a cool little bit of trivia.
Today is the day this 15-year-old boy becomes a 15-year-old man, no? Okay, here we are. I want those great-grandkids on my desk by February. Have fun, you two. And he leaves him in the room with a 14-year-old girl named Maria Antonia.
This was a very hard scene to get right. This went through like 2 or 3 rewrites, and I was still like, even after animating it, I wasn't 100% sure if I was going to include it in the final video, because originally, spooky Dracula music. Originally, if I look back at my notes here, I was trying to like make the joke about how, it's all of the adults in the room who are, being really bawdy and like cracking bad jokes, and like, the way that this worked was that basically the entire crowd of like Louis's grandfather, the king, and all of these other nobles would like escort them to bed and then, wake up and congratulate them in the morning. And I wanted the focus to be on like, look how silly these adults are acting while the kids are, being the only adults in the room and being like, look, I'm 14, like this is not happening. And I was just like really struggling to find a way to like try to make that scene funny without it just being really, really uncomfortable, given the circumstances. Looking at my other notes here. We'll get to that. At least until she came to France and they told her she's Marie Antoinette now. She's the Archduchess of Austria and daughter of the great Maria Theresa. And the thought of the French and the Holy Roman Empire being friends. This was of the great. There's like 2 things Maria Theresa. Yeah, first of all, here, for anyone that recognizes this was just recycled footage from the Maria Theresa video of like the 7 Years' War and her and all of her, allies being the super friends. And the thought of the French and the Holy Roman Empire being friends was still as much of a shock to a lot of the French as it is to me. This was something that I was actually very surprised. I gave this script to a friend of mine to read who is not like, particularly who's into history, but like into very narrow slices of history. I was very surprised to learn that like being shocked at the Holy Roman Empire and France being friends is like not a thing that would read to most people. So I had to like, add little images below them just to like make clear that these two do not like each other. It's weird trying to like appeal to different audiences, but that's something I am trying to work on. Stopping to read chat. Zephyrus, nice touch. Zephyrus, where the hell have you been? Let's see what I got next up here.
So, good to see you.
Oh, right, this scene continues. No wonder I was so afraid of it turning out cringy.
You? Maria, right? Yeah. Do you mind if we don't?
Yeah, let's not, no.
Oh, thank God. I mean, not that you're, it's just that...
Yep.
Understandably, they tucked into bed and faced apart, thinking the awkward part of the wedding was over, until the next morning when... Congratulations!
All real stuff. This video is brought to you by... Oh, hey, it's the ad spot. Do I have anything interesting to say over the ad spot? Let's find out. I don't think so. Every once in a while, though, there'll be like, a recommendation for a documentary that has like something interesting about it that I never get to mention in the video because I am limited in time. No, I've just got all my notes here. My notes are all spread across between 2 different documents, and it's terrible. Jay Thomas, when are you doing the Call of War round? Whenever they contact me about doing more sponsorships, then we shall see. Nope, nothing here. All right. To the delight of everyone, I'm sure we're just gonna skip on through
series
that.
Global Conquest known to man.
Oh, yeah,
A trial at MagellanTV.com about Australia.
That trail's still good, though. I'm sure you can still go to that link. They'd still appreciate it. They still got good stuff.
Inheriting a kingdom as a Jack Rackham. Louis became king just a few years later. Inheriting a kingdom as a teenager is kind of like being a child actor. It rarely ends well. If all you know...
Unless you're Charles XII, of course. In which case, it starts a little rough, Well, no, you know what? Started a little rough, got very good. In the end, though, still didn't end well, but not due to him being a teenager.
About him is the revolution. You might expect that he went completely off the rails as a mad tyrant, but really, if you've seen my Pedro II,
Nice Resident Evil reference in there. It's great having, like, other people to work on these videos with, because there's little, small little references in here that I would not think of on my own, that they, just have that, like, knowledge or familiarity with like other little pieces of pop culture that just haven't made their way to me.
completely off the rails as a mad tyrant, but really, if you've seen my Pedro II video, the two were surprisingly similar. It bears repeating that even the best monarch does not extend his merits to absolute monarchy as a form of government, but
This is something I felt I had to put in here because the Pedro II video has gotten so many comments on either side of the monarchy debate, where there's like people who are, telling me like you can't say nice things about kings or monarchs because you're going to give people ideas, and then we're just all going to slide 200 years backwards into absolute rule. And then on the other hand, you've got all these like monarchists who are like, yeah, don't you see? The last king we had was a good guy, so therefore we need monarchy because all of the other monarchs will be just as good. Trust us. And obviously, Brazil has its own complicated history with monarchies and republics, for that matter, as a form of government, because most of Brazil's history as a republic was not super democratic either, but, yeah.
But with that said, after Louis became king at the age of 19, his sole mission as king was to be loved by the people.
All right, I'm pretty sure I've got something written down here for this. If I was a more prepared fellow, I would, read and remember all of my notes ahead of time. But what's the point of live streaming if you can't do it off the cuff and super casually and just push stream and start going? We don't need plans. Was this? No, I think that actually made it into the video about giving people the right to be Protestants or to be Jewish. Oh, I had something in here about the reforms on, like, this was something that ultimately didn't get too much screen time in this video, but there was a lot of in the same way that like the end of the Roman Republic just has a lot of very famous figures who all did different things. The French Revolution is something a little bit like that, in that you have a lot of these different like philosopher politicians who are simultaneously like involved in some way with the revolution, either for or against, but who also have like a lot of their writings have survived on their own. So like even before the revolution, you've got people like Turgot, who was the finance minister, helping Louis, and Malesherbes, Necker, all of these different people who had their, different economic ideals and things like that. Where? I'm having such a hard time figuring out where the chat is on this video, because I'm seeing people being like, the ad is the best part. I'm like, what? I thought the live stream was like 30 seconds behind, not like 2 or 3 minutes. Coolio, the French court post Louis XIV was so weird. Yeah, Louis XIV really screwed with the French court there. Like, that somebody who makes, the king's bathroom attendant the most powerful position in the land has got some interesting ideas on government. There was really cool stuff about Louis XIV though, and like his strategy to doing all of that. Like it's this most bizarre, like everything was mind games. Like everything was just like, okay, the aristocracy has more power than I would like. How can I just like forget? How can I make them forget that they have all this power and start fighting with each other instead of me? Someone's asking if I can press G for a second. I wonder at what speed a YouTuber watches YouTube videos. I don't even know what the G button does. Oh, okay, it just doubles the speed. Ah, I didn't know that. That is actually a very handy shortcut. Yeah, the thing that I've got up here that I forgot to get rid of is just this little extra speeder, because I found that sometimes I'm watching at double speed. I'm like, you know what? This isn't really doing it for me. I gotta speed this up a little more. Let's get like 3 or 4 times going. But I think for this instance, that would not be the wisest move. But yeah, if you're wondering at what speed I'm normally watching videos, it's a little over double. Every time it's paused, the video turns white. I don't know why it does that, but it's better than what it was doing before on Premiere, where it just wasn't giving you a video at all. So we're gonna work with what we've got. Mayan Harari Jack should make a video about Charles V. Managed to hold on to a fractured empire, faced many rebellions, managed to repel the Ottomans at Vienna, and captured the French king. Interesting guy. Oh, and he captured the Pope. Don't forget about kidnapping the Pope. That's always a good look. Yeah, Charles V is he's a very, very classic European ruler. I probably should do something on him at some time, because I've already done Henry VIII and Henry II. Yes, Henry II of France, who were both reigning at the same time. I've not done one on Francis, but all of those sort of, that big trio of Western European monarchs, in the Renaissance. That'd be interesting. Von Casper. To be fair, capturing the Pope is kind of like playing capture the flag for European emperors. To be fair, it is. Absolute monarchy as a form of government, but with that said, after Louis became king at the age of 19, his sole mission as king was to be loved by the people. Oh yeah, this is where, I think even in my notes I didn't get very far with this, being like, yeah, there were reforms and stuff and things that Marechal and his financial advisors were saying, but I don't know what they are. Man, he was a bit of a revolutionary himself, pushing forward an edict of religious tolerance that extended the right to exist to Jews and even Protestants. And, France obviously has its history with Protestants. I don't know how much I'm preaching to the choir here, but yeah, France was I want to say had some of the worst instances of religious wars, where just for hundreds of years, there were Protestants and Catholics killing each other. Always consult public opinion, he would say. It is never wrong. Actual quote from Louis XVI, which is kind of hilarious that the guy who ends up getting his head cut off by public opinion is the same one who's like, yeah, the general public, they're always right. They could never do wrong by me. The trouble began in the fact that Louis wanted to be liked by everybody, and anything too forward-thinking was sure to draw the ire of the nobility. I think this was a part where I had to cut some stuff from the script. I had to actually trim it by a couple paragraphs, because every script in this French Revolution series just ended up being like 3,000 or 4,000 words or something. It ended up being somewhere between 20 and 30 minutes, and it's that's too long for animation, man. Trying to animate that much stuff in 2 weeks. What did I say here? Ah, yes. Cut content. So the original script went, he and Maria, or en français Marie, weren't particularly fond of each other, but it really mattered to the public that they start having kids because the future of the kingdom depended on it, unless, God forbid, some sort of popular uprising were to upend the monarchy altogether. Okay, so this was actually, the next paragraph goes, blah, 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 a couple of years, there were these public pamphlets openly mocking the two. So basically, it was just a word count trim. No real information that got lost there. It just went back to those libels about, poking fun at the king's fertility. Yeah, his relationship with Marie Antoinette is kind of interesting in that it is, I don't want to say it's the epitome, but it's a very good example of spouses, in pre-modern times being more of like a political thing and being like, yeah, okay, so we're not really in love with each other, but like we're gonna treat each other like business partners, and we're gonna just do what we gotta do for the family and the country.
You see, France was massively in debt, but it had the money to pay off that debt. It's just that the people with the money were the same people who were legally exempt from paying taxes, and also the same people who were in charge of tax law. But the crown had to do something, because by 1775, Louis had already had to put down over 100 different riots. In some sense, the revolution was already beginning to take shape.
Oh, what was the name of... I don't know if it was in 1775. I'm trying to look through all the stuff that I'd written about this. But there was a whole, Wikipedia article, like a whole bunch of information about this uprising that took place a couple years before the French Revolution proper that was really interesting. I think it was kind of similar to, like, the Women's March on Versailles. It was called, like, something bread riots or something like that. I'm hoping someone in the chat will know what I'm talking about and be able to pull that up for me. Jojo Ni asking, every script, really? How is that possible? Assuming you're talking about the length, that is, it's because there's just too much on the French Revolution. There's too much information. Oh my god. It's like, the end of the Roman Republic is only manageable because it happened 2,000 years ago, and, so we only have a certain number of sources. Like, imagine if Rome happened only, like, 200 years ago or 250 years ago. Like, the amount of information we'd have would be overwhelming. The Flower War is what I was thinking of, which was this big event in France that, basically every time the price of bread went up, there were riots just immediately, because you've got people, like, starving to death and the government being like, not like we don't want to help, but, like, we just kind of don't really know how. And also, if you're gonna rebel against us, we're gonna have to use the military. And then, they come in and they shoot everybody. God, in a lot of ways, the French Revolution also feels more contemporary than some of the stuff that happened, than, like, the Napoleonic Wars, for instance. Like, I don't know, there's something very, like, the way, the description of the Women's March on Versailles, the way that, like, all the sources talked about, the crowd was outside and they didn't have an exact plan, but someone found a way inside the building, and then there were all these people, like, roaming around and trying to find important members of the government and potentially harm or kill them, was just very, like, living in 2021 post Capitol riots. It was very like, oh wait, that feels familiar. But of course I didn't want to draw the comparison in the video, because that feels very, like, the actual description of the way that events unfolded bears a lot of similarity, but you don't want to be like, oh yeah, taking a stand against monarchy, literally the same thing as trying to overrule an election. Totally. Yeah, that's it. The bread riots. Flower Wars. I would be very interested in, if there were, like, important people involved in the Flower Wars, it would be really cool to kind of take a look back on them and, like, just ask the question, like, what stopped this from being the French Revolution? Like, why was the storming of the Bastille the event that, like, totally triggered everything and, nothing was ever the same afterwards, but not the Flower War? Because the Bastille, hot take, I feel like the storming of the Bastille was a little overrated in terms of, like, a monumental historical event. because, you know, A, there were hardly any people being held there, and so it's not like a bunch of, you know, important political prisoners or something got freed. It was mostly just a handful of, like, kind of petty criminals. But B, I'm already losing my train of thought. That's the main thing. Oh, but B, like, it wasn't the event that, you know, like the tennis court oath, right? And being like, hey, we're gonna make a constitution. Like, that has big implications on the way that the rest of the revolution plays out. Whereas the storming of the Bastille is sort of just like representative of the revolution. And like, hey, this is like the kind of energy we have. It's kind of like symbolic, but like the tennis court oath and stuff like that, that feels way more significant to me personally. You know, like that's how the storming of the Bastille didn't really end up playing much of a role in these videos, because there isn't, you know, there's a rule popularized in screenwriting, which is, you know, you want to connect all the beats of your story with therefore or but then, to make sure that everything is kind of like logically consistent and it flows together, and you're not just, you don't want to connect it with, oh, and then this random thing happened and it had no impact on the story. And that's kind of what it felt like trying to like shoehorn too much information about the Bastille in here. It's like, I can't really like do it without being like, yeah, you know. Also, side note, tangent, if you want a feel of like what stuff was like, here it is. Luckily, as long as France didn't take on any outrageous new spending, they would be fine. Turgot, do you see what I'm seeing? Oh, this was, okay, I've got some stuff to say about the American Revolution and France's involvement in it, but this was really funny in that between this video and the Robespierre video, Robespierre had a couple moments in it that were actually really tricky to animate, but no one really notices them because they're just imitations of, you know, stuff that ordinary cameras do all the time. I'll see if I can pull it up. I'll probably reference it again when I get back, but, you know, who knows if the same people will be watching or if I just totally forget. I'm really hoping it's pulled up on the side. Yeah, there it is. In Robespierre, thanks YouTube for starting me off 1 second into the video. I don't know when I watched this video for only 1 second, probably just to like make sure that the sponsor link was working, but where is it? And this is something that I would love to pull up in Premiere that I will have to, but it won't show anything. I'll pull it up in Premiere when we get to this video, because I want to do all three live. But for now, where is it? Okay, here. For now, I'll just show you the end result, and we can.
Government
dig up
is like,
the
oh
number of
god,
layers
this
later.
guy's insane.
Pause.
And Robespierre
Pause,
crashed.
please. Pause. Let me bring down. I think I brought the volume down already, but this is just a large part of the
Is in through the door,
a loud part of the video anyway.
shouting, insane. Am I? Is that what you've been thinking?
Okay, right there. That was the most complicated part to animate, because if you look at all of these people in the crowd, every single one of these people is an individual layer, which means that they are all being rendered separately, and I believe they are all animated separately. Like, some of them move together, but just at like offset times, so it looks like kind of, oh, this whole section of the crowd is moving. I'm gonna mute this. So like, yeah, you get stuff like this where it's like, oh, okay. Oh no, you know what? I couldn't copy and paste the animation because they are in different places in the video. Oh, that's not entirely true. Sometimes it's based off of where in the composition. Anyway, all the people move, so that's a whole thing on its own, which meant that I couldn't render it all at once. Like, I couldn't watch the preview with all of the people. I had to like turn off a whole bunch of layers and be like, okay, I'm only going to watch these three people and make sure that they're all reacting to him. But the real complicated part of the video is, if I back up just a few frames,
I think my mouse is turned on. This little corner of where the light is spilling over the pews, because everything behind it, right? These pews they're just part of the background. It's all just kind of like painted on. But Robespierre needs to start behind this corner and move in front of it. But he always needs to be in front of this, like, glow. But the glow needs to be in front of the pew. So somehow, the glow needs to be on top of the pew. Robespierre needs to be on top of the glow, but Robespierre has to be behind the pew. So there's, like, 3 or 4 different, like, duplicated layers that are, like, coming and going at weird times, and like some of this is like baked into the background, but then some of it is just like a tiny mask over just this little part. Like, this was so complicated. Whereas the thing that I've gotten like a good number of comments on, where like throughout this scene where Louis is talking to Turgot, "Your Majesty, we mustn't." Turgot. The whole scene is being, like, replicated in the mirror, and that looks really complicated, because if this were, like, hand-drawn animation, that would be such a pain. But because this is all digital, I just exported. This was just a regular mirror. I exported the whole thing, I copied it, I flipped it, shrank it down, masked it, bam. This was like 10 minutes, and it looks super impressive. Which is, hey, it's you win some, you lose some. Hey, and Canubis is in chat. What's going on? Someone telling me I could have copied and pasted and adjusted the anchor point. Yeah, that's kind of that's how I did a lot of it. I stopped going into it because I didn't want to like get into too much detail, but yeah, basically a lot of this stuff is just imported from Photoshop documents, so they all are set by default. They're in different parts, they're in different places within the video, but they all share the same anchor point, so a lot of times I can just copy and paste stuff like that. All right, just scrolling through chat. I have to see you all admire my craft.
Who am I?
The King of France, Your Majesty.
Correct.
And if there is one thing that I share with each and every one of my forefathers for the last 1,000 years, the very essence of what it is to be French, it is. I'm noticing so many little, like, mouth noises that I did not remove in the audio, and it's totally bugging me. This, with God as my witness, when I see an opportunity to stick it to the British, I am going to take it! Another interesting animation thing that I really wish I had gotten Premiere to work. Maybe we will actually split this up. If I don't get through everything today, I'm going to try to figure out how to make Premiere actually show up and not just give you a gray screen the whole time. Actually, I wonder if it was because it was paused and not playing, because the YouTube video is doing something similar. I'm going to try it, because I would like to show just this cool little animation fun fact. Switch over to Premiere. Thank you. What part of the video are we on? 409. So if we jump to, like, here-ish, and we try to play it, which in itself could be a struggle, because Premiere, the one bad thing about Premiere is the longer that the video goes for, even if you're not trying to render anything super complicated, even if you're just trying to render, like, you know, a simple one layer of video, if there's too much stuff in the entire project, it'll just freak out and be like, no, I'm sorry, I can't do that, man, that's too much. So we'll see if streaming on top of that doesn't just totally kill it. Yeah, no, that's not playing. Anyway, as I
switch back here. Just the fun little thing with that is that, like, if you look at where Turgot's arm is, I had to, like, very carefully put Louis in front of him so that you couldn't realize that he just had this arm that was, like, totally distorted and, like, not at all connected to the rest of his body. It's just, like, coming out, like, of his stomach. But it
So the
looks
Yankees-
a lot better. Oh, yeah, so French Revolution and, oh, thanks so much for the donation. I hope I haven't, like, missed a bunch. Oh my god, there's another one. Thank you so much. I hope I haven't, like, been missing any of these, because I'm only periodically going back to check the chat. Haggai Duanis, I do not recognize that symbol, but 3 of them. And, Dlafdex, a $5 Australian? Hi, Jack, love your videos. Thank you so much. Where was I going? Oh, I had notes on the French Revolution. Oh no, this is more, I'm just finding nothing but brackets, which is just all, like, placeholder text. But basically, there was a whole thing in France with Louis actually wasn't, like, quite so, you know, I've got to fight Britain because Britain and France, yeah. He had this other advisor, Jacques Necker, who was kind of talked him into it a little bit. I forget exactly, you know, the economic doctrine behind it, but they were kind of like, there were, what do I have written here? Fears of Britain conceding to the colonies and attacking France right after its potential. Oh, that's right. France had a lot of land in the New World that it had kind of lost to Britain over the years. So the thought was like, okay, if Britain, you know, right away just concedes to the colonies and whatever, you know, there's a possibility that, like, we're the next target, that they just say, all right, whatever, screw America, we're going to go fight France next. And so France was like, okay, we'd rather you fight both of us at the same time. And the other thing was that, yeah, like, maybe we can get Canada back. Maybe we can get parts of India. Maybe we can get these, like, really important islands where you are growing and selling all of your, like, sugar and rum. And none of that actually ended up happening, because even though France won the war, and, you know, the Americans really came out on top because they get everything they wanted for the most part. But France was in this position, making sure I didn't screw up my microphone. France was in this position where it's like, hey, we won the war, that's technically a victory, but we have nothing to show for it. We didn't really get any land. All we did was just lose a bunch of money, and, like, hey, technically we made a new ally in the New World, but that didn't really last as soon as the French Revolution started, and they, you know, got into the quasi-war in, like, 96 or something. So, you know, 20 years later, they're already at war with them. So, it's a big bummer. Oh, and there was also, looking through my notes again, you got some guy named de Calonne coming in and proposing to buy their way out of debt by spending lots of money on public spending. So yeah, you know, borrow your way out of debt. Great strategy. Which, you know, if they had been able to get something out of it worthwhile, then who knows. Someone... Uh-oh. YouTube is not receiving enough video to maintain smooth streaming. Barris is here too. I may have missed you earlier. It doesn't show up with, like... Oh, it's probably because, not verified. I'm like, why isn't this getting bolded? Gotta love French Revolution stuff. Gotta love French Revolution stuff. Someone had asked if I could speak French, and the answer is juste un peu. I took French for like 3 years in high school, and, you know, I continued doing it in, like, Duolingo and stuff like that for a little time after, but I can't do much more than, you know, kind of basic conversation, like, enough to kind of try to survive and get by, but not much more. This is... Wait, what? Why is this?
Are you guys seeing what I'm seeing here? Which is like, I'm seeing the Louis the 16th video, but with my behind the scenes like streaming information stuff in it. That's very weird. Oh, sweet. Paris just arrived. I'm always way more paranoid about the chat than I ought to be. But yeah, so like I've taken enough French where I can like, you know, survive if you drop me in a French town, and I can like pronounce names and stuff like that. So like if I know what the words are and I can like translate stuff to French ahead of time and put it in a video, you know, I feel like I can speak it kind of comfortably. But in conversation, no. And I don't really speak much other than that. You know, I know a little bit of Latin, but I grew up learning Latin the like ecclesiastical way, which is like, you know, where you kind of do a very sort of modern version of it. You don't pronounce it the way that it would have been spoken classically, nor do you do it the way Italian is. You just kind of like, you know, all of the V's are V's, and whatever the other big difference is. But yeah, so I say things like, you know, vinum, veni vidi vici, instead of veni vidi vici, which is, you know, more historically accurate. But there's other channels who can tell you stuff like that. Get independence, and France gets another billion livres in debt. They tried to fudge the numbers by insisting that ordinary revenues covered for ordinary expenses, but that didn't make the problem go away. So a new plan was hatched to spend their way out of debt. All they had to do was get enough public spending going to bolster confidence, increase the amount they can borrow, and to do that, all they needed was some money from more debt or more taxes. I think the plan here was that they were going to they were going to try to spend a bunch, convince everyone that they had plenty of money floating around, and then borrow a little more, and then put that into like public infrastructure and things that would actually give them a net return, you know, rather than like more wars halfway around the world. But it was just too little too late. If you think those are unpopular opinions today, when Louis tried to pass one of the most comprehensive tax reforms pre-revolution, not only did the aristocratic courts immediately shoot it down, even middle-class citizens were out in the streets burning effigies of the finance minister. I love this. I was reading some book when I found this, and I was like, that is just perfect. The perfect image of, like, you never really think of, like, you know, the finance minister as being the one that people are like in the streets you know, wishing them death and burning effigies, but apparently in France. And what was the other thing? I feel like I saw something else here that the way that the court system in France worked at the time was very interesting. I'm sure Barris probably knows more about it than I do, but I'm sorry, I'm reading comments about Latin and I'm getting myself distracted. Note to self. Learn when to look at the comments and when not to. Oh, the court system, yes. Barris can probably tell you more about the court system than I can. However, it was like, I think they were all in like different districts, and they played some role kind of throughout the revolution, in that they were, you know, important even after they kind of upended the whole system, where you still had to kind of like appease the local people, except, you know, instead of local aristocrats, it was whomever. God, there's just some weird video stuff going on every time I switch tabs. I don't know what's making that happen. Anyway, yeah, I saw people commenting about Latin. Someone mentioned Cambridge Latin, and yeah, that was absolutely where I was learning that from. Which is not only, like, you know, the best Latin book, that is like got to be one of the best foreign language books that I am aware of, because it's so much better than like, oh, blah blah blah, how is your day, what is your favorite color. It's like, oh, let's have these like crazy stories about, you know, boat races and like a dude bringing his bear to the king, and the bear gets loose and attacks people, and like, oh, the mountain's exploding and we're trying to run out of Pompeii, and all of this cool stuff that is just like way more fun than, you know, translate, even though you're just translating a block of text, way better than filling in really bland personal questions about yourself in another language.
And so if he can't afford to borrow money, and he can't muster new taxes on his own, there's only one move left. He must summon the Estates General.
This was, A, a music transition that I am very pleased at myself with, but B, this was something that I never really understood before researching this myself, is there was all of this talk about, like, you know, oh, okay, class, we're going to learn about the three estates and, you know, what they were and why the third estate was so upset. I never really understood why the estates were there in the first place, because they hadn't been called in, like, you know, 150 years. So it's like, why would you intentionally go out of your way to give even 33% power to sort of the commoners? And it was because, like, he just couldn't get anything done any other way. Like, ironically, yeah, the estates were called because Louis XVI was kind of not exactly on the side of the people, but, like, he was also having issues with the aristocracy and the nobility, who were just, like, shooting down everything he tried to do and being like, hey, no, sorry, we're gonna elect not to pay taxes, thanks. So it is just such irony that he ends up really bearing the brunt of the French people's animosity towards the aristocracy and the whole Ancien regime.
The most powerful and influential.
I'm not sure where this the rest of this image came from, but this is just a fun little bit of a fun Talleyrand cameo, because at the time he was actually a clergyman, and that was, like, his role in the Second Estate, was that he was, like, in church at the time, until, you know, a couple of years later, where all of a sudden he's like, oh no, the church is bad and we shall take all of their property. I have never associated with them.
Influential men in France are assembled.
This is Sieyes, who also was, like, very important in terms of breaking up the three estates and, like, starting the revolution and the tennis court oath and all that stuff. And then he just totally faded into obscurity. And then all of a sudden he came back when Napoleon and him are, like, doing that coup with the Directory. And then he just fades away again. He, like, shows up just in time to, like, kickstart France into the next chapter, and then so long. But he survived, so that's probably what counts.
Assembled in Versailles.
And of course we got Lafayette. I think this is Mirabeau, who was the guy who shows up in the Robespierre video, who was, like, very much initially on the side of, like, you know, the revolution, until it came to light that, like, oh, he's been sharing letters with the king and they're all very chummy, and he's very, like, excited to tell Louis about how he's totally gonna turn things around for him, and that, you know, really got under people's skin. Let me make sure this actually is Mirabeau or Mirabeau. Yeah, that's him. That is not a great... What was that picture it was showing of him? Somewhere... Oh, there we go. I don't know why that's the one that shows up as his preview. Look at this, like, super classical... Oh, that's right. A, I was gonna say, look at this, like, these super classical renditions of them. Like, that's gotta be pretty cool. But B, they're... one of the French government chambers, Palais de Justice d'Aix-en-Provence, that makes it sound like it's a court of some kind. I thought it was like a Senate chamber. Anyway, they've got all of these, like, you know, Enlightenment/revolutionary thinkers lining the walls, and it was pretty interesting to see during, because it looks so dramatic and so cool, just having, like, you know, the ghosts of these great thinkers over you. So I had to use it for the Robespierre video, but it was kind of funny that, like, there's these statues of people who are, like, still alive at the time or under heavy contempt at the time, like Mirabeau would have been. businessmen,
And then, of course, we have Robespierre himself. This is cheeky little
politicians,
grin.
landowners, priests, great thinkers, and war heroes. The Estates General was the only body powerful enough to break the deadlock and make new taxes, but it was also a huge gamble on the side of the king because they would have the power to make other changes as well. For instance, they undid a lot of censorship laws, although I'm not sure exactly what those laws were covering since there were already pamphlets literally called libels having a go at Louis's supposed infertility. This is totally unrelated,
Oh, goodness.
but highly
Got some good stuff. I really hope I've got some extra notes on the whole thing
amusing.
with
The
his brother-in-law.
pamphlets asked, "Can't the king do it?" And Marie Antoinette's brother goes, "Oh, I can confirm. He can do it." Because, and this is true, Louis and Marie Antoinette eventually had kids, but only after her brother, the goddamn Holy Roman Emperor himself, came to France, evaluated Louis's performance in the bedroom, and gave him coaching tips on how to apply himself to his marital duties. Now, he was never actually in the room, that would have been ludicrous, but he did write to his brother once, saying, and I quote, "Oh, if I could only have been present once, I would have taken care of him."
This is actually the least explicit thing that I could put in there. So, like, I had to do some serious filtering in order to take a quote from him that would be, like, kind of, at least PG-13, PG-13, and not immediately get this video, like, demonetized or taken down. 'Cause he, like, oh boy, he was really thinking about how exactly he would get Louis going. I thought I had. Let me make sure if I don't have any more notes on random stuff. What do we got going on in chat? The best way to live the French Revolution is not being near France. True. Hey, love the appreciation for the background tracks. Yeah, there's a lot of it isn't actually too complicated. It's mostly like I'll look for one point in the track where I'm like, okay, this point in the track is good to go here, and then I'll just kind of like extend it from there. It doesn't all fit perfectly. It's just mostly about just having that one spot where it's like, ooh, yeah, it really lines up nicely with the content. Like having the music fade out right before the end of the video, stuff like that. That's all about the estates. Banishing and arresting people. Parliament. Oh, okay. This is just like, apparently, yeah. In addition to, one of the legitimate criticisms of him is that he was, he did have that power mentioned in the Robespierre video to like arrest people for no reason, and he wasn't, going off the rails with it the way that Robespierre was, but he was like, trying to banish and arrest like the right people just to be like, let's make sure we don't have too much criticism coming our way. And the other interesting thing with Louis XVI is that, like, legally speaking, he had the same powers as Louis XIV did, or even that Louis XV did. And he, like, technically he could do all of this stuff, but he couldn't do it in reality because he didn't have that chutzpah. He didn't have, like, the same kind of, like, ability to play mind games and get the nobles to, like, compete with each other and stuff like that. And he knew that, like, if he really tries to go too far, like, they're gonna call his bluff big time, which ended up being what everybody did. And trust me, the full context is much more explicit. However, the Estates General had not been called in over 150 years, or 3 Louis ago, and it was janky as all hell. There were weird rules about who was allowed to wear what, and most importantly, it was split up into 3 councils that each got a vote. On the side of the fashion police, one of those things was that, like, if you were a member of the clergy or the nobility,
you were supposed to show up, like, dressed as fancy as you can be and really, like, flex on everybody. And if you were a member of the Third Estate, you were supposed to be like, no, you're gonna show up, you're gonna be dressed in all black, you were gonna be, like, super drab and unimportant, and you just want to, like, you have to remind everybody how little we care about you. One for the clergy, one for the nobility, and one for the other 95% of the population. There is a little caveat here in that the Third Estate was technically the estate that was, like, representing, you know, everybody else and the common people. But the people who were actually making up the Third Estate were all, like, you know, wealthy landowners and, like, bankers and businessmen and lawyers and, you know, very much like the kind of people who would be in the 1% of the 95%. So it wasn't strictly that they were, like, really 95% of the population being there. It was more like, hey, we are also 1% of the population, but we represent and we have control over more people, so we should get more votes. A bunch of folks in that third category go, this is dumb. You're dumb. We're making our own council where we all get counted equally and we're the ones making the laws. And a bunch of the priests go with them, and Louis goes, wait, no, this isn't how this is supposed to work at all. What are you guys voting on there, guys? Stop it. But it was too late. Just checking chat for a second. Just keeps on it. I don't know how to say your name, but thank you. It's a lot of Louis ago. It is a lot of Louis ago. Well, you can blame the guy helping me pull images for the pony. I thought it was funny enough. I feel like it won't invite too much bronyism to the comment section as long as there's just the one. Thanks, Junkyard Joe. Says, I just want to say you make awesome videos and you got an awesome voice. Thanks. Yes, share with your pals. That's the important stuff. Samuel 1, didn't he have a PP too big syndrome? I don't know about that. I'm sure there is, like, all kinds of rumors that people were making up about, like, you know, what the king's issues actually were. I'm missing stuff. By this point, a majority of the estates had made the switch, and the monarchy was absolute no longer. See, what I really should do is just, like, have myself a second monitor so I can watch chat at the same time, but then I will be way too easily distracted and just, like, constantly seeing things and drifting off mid-sentence. So the French Revolution is weird because it kind of happened from the top down and the bottom up simultaneously, because this was a bunch of appointed officials taking power away from the king, but at the same time you've got stuff like the storming of the Bastille, which was the common people on the ground tearing down the old establishment, but in general, this was the phase. Oh, you know what? I think you can also see in this video, you can see the parts where I started doing the animation versus when someone else was doing the animation. Yeah, like right here, this was my animator doing the animation, and then over here, you can tell it's me doing the animation because the way we each get the Podium Man image, and then we will, like, construct the little chalk bit ourselves. And probably what we should be doing is actually doing that all at the start, but it works well enough. It's not a big distraction. No longer. So the French Revolution is weird because it kind of happened from the top down and the bottom up simultaneously, tearing down the old establishment, but in general, this was the phase when everybody still had their ships together. The Nationalists... God, what an old and Not necessarily too funny running joke. I feel like that running joke was a little more amusing when like none of my videos had any swearing in them. I feel like it doesn't necessarily work so well anymore, but it gives me a kick out of it. Oh yeah, wait, how much? I have been surprised going through this. Like, I'll say something and be like, oh, this is a fun little behind the scenes, like, extra stuff that I found in research, and then I'll push play on the video and realize that I say the same thing in the video. Published the Declaration of the Rights of Man with a little help from Jefferson. All in all, it was... Okay, so I don't think I say too much about the way Jefferson was involved. Let me try to make sure, catch where I am. Okay, yeah, so, like... The other people involved in that Declaration of the Rights of Man were Lafayette, and Mirabeau was also another one who was there. There's kind of like a whole little arc going on with him that I would love to track. Like the French Revolution in general, even though I've just done the entire thing, I feel like it would still be cool to kind of go back in and see more perspectives and, like, you know, do one on Lafayette or one on Mirabeau or we've already done Talleyrand, but like he had a really cool angle on it where like he's the guy who's like, you know, look, I don't really care who's in charge or what kind of government we're going for. Like, I just kind of want to make the most of what we've got. Okay, yeah, I missed something on the Bastille actually. So the Bastille was originally stormed, I think, based on rumors that like Louis was going to break up the assembly. Like, people were talking about, oh, he's gonna take his personal Swiss Guard and he's just gonna go in there and like split everybody up, and like, we gotta do something about this, we gotta stop him. And that was kind of how this whole fervor built up until they eventually stormed the Bastille. Because he was kind of doing, like, he was trying to do everything he could legally to stop them from meeting. And, you know, he only kind of backed down once a certain number of, like, the clergy got involved, and it really became clear that, like, no, everyone is, like, supporting the National Assembly. This was also around the time when Lafayette was made the new commander of the National Guard, and Lafayette was really kind of interesting, his role in all this, because like he's the one writing the Declaration of the Rights of Man, but also he's consistently working very closely with the king and doing some stuff that made the revolutionaries very unhappy. There was also, I've got notes here that I'm not sure what to make of them, like former Minister Foulon, Foulon. There's two L's. I forget how you do that in French. Is killed, and Lafayette can't save him. I think that's like, I'm guessing that was probably like some kind of riot that somebody got caught up in. I don't know if that was like the former commander of the National Guard or not. There's also a really cool moment where I have in my notes here, King arrives in Paris and dons the tricolor cockade. I'm smiling, but I am really fucking furious. Great Death of Stalin reference. Such a fabulous movie. Where it's just like Louis kind of has to put on a show and be like, all right, you guys, look at me supporting the people. Okay, is this what you wanted? Because I'm doing it, but I am not happy about it. And he's just trying to grin through his teeth. Okay, the next stuff I've got is on the Women's March. We can carry on. 21st Louis on the Louis. I just see people constructing a calendar of Louis. Oh, Star asks, why couldn't they stop the food prices from going up? Because economics is complicated. I don't really have the best answer for this. Because the only way that they eventually did kind of put a stop to it during the revolution at one point. Like I think they literally just put a cap on it. They're like, hey, you legally cannot charge this much for food. Like, you have to cut it down. Which kind of went against supply and demand, but it's like, hey, like, you know, we just gotta like make sure people are not dying on the streets right now. Because there was all sorts of controversy, you know, when they eventually removed that law.
And then all of a sudden prices went back up again, and it's like, oh no, we need to find another way to deal with this. But I think it was some combination of debt and inflation and supply and demand, and yeah, I don't know. I'm not the right person to ask about that. Von Casper saying, high regulations, uncooperative merchants, no one willing to buy their stuff since everything was expensive. Yeah, it's true. Like, if you were selling bread, you know, you're kind of screwed because everything was getting more expensive. Zephyrus, yes, I'm so glad you're with me on Death of Stalin. Oh, it's so good. I don't know. I don't know how I would work that in unless I, like, did something on Stalin or Zhukov or one of those guys. But yeah, that is like, if there's any film out there in the world that I would like most want to have written, it is absolutely Death of Stalin. It gets very heavy very quickly. It goes from being like, oh, it's just a little bit of dark comedy, we're all laughing, we're all having a good time, it's just terrible people doing terrible things to each other. Oh no, wait, oh, this gets really dark. Khrushchev would be an interesting one. Just do my own retelling of it. Yeah, but like the way they introduce Zhukov in that, Zhukov, I don't know exactly how you're supposed to say it, but the way they introduce him in that film is like such a great introduction, because without even saying anything, you immediately know what kind of a guy he is, and like you immediately know the status he has and like the station he has in society, and just like how badass he is, and like the way that people look at him and all of that stuff. And that is how I want to introduce characters like on my channel, is like I want to be able to just like in 2 seconds be like, look how much swagger this man has. Hot Sprinkles donates $2 saying, will we ever see Cicero, Puppy? One day I want to do Cicero. I was gonna say I've been away from Rome for long enough, but I might have some more Roman history coming up, so get ready for that. New video idea someday. Scramble of what happened after the death of Stalin. Who knows? Maybe. Might just do that. The kind of origin story that democracies dream about, and for the most part, Mr. Will of the People seemed to tolerate it because he couldn't do much else, and maybe France could have transitioned with relative peace to a constitutional monarchy and eventually become like Britain is today. But one day the people showed up at his doorstep with guns. A bunch of women in the Parisian marketplace said to themselves, hey, we can't afford to eat. Isn't there somebody who's supposed to fix that sort of thing? And soon enough, a small army of 7,000 had made their way to Versailles. A small delegation made their way to the king's chambers, to whom he turned on the charm and went, ladies, believe me, we are gonna disperse food from the royal stores, and you will not starve. But like, in a way that was somehow so charming that one of the women fainted, unless that was just malnutrition. But the rest of the crowd was not so moved. I don't understand what's going on with that story. That's just such a weird retelling of events. The fact that, like, it's recorded that, like, oh, Louis was just so good with women. He never quite could get his wife to like him that much. But boy, when he is talking with the commoners, he just really puts on the charm. Is it just me, or is that angry mob getting bigger? Lafayette. Yes, that is the Soga King theme song. Thank you for asking. Defender of truth, justice, and the American way. Lafayette, come quickly. Bring the National Guard. I've got some good news and some bad news for you, Chief. The good news is that the National Guard is already here. The bad news is they all joined the protesters. This was another really thing that made me really think Lafayette was, like, way cooler than I did originally, because, you know, at first I'm like, okay, yeah, Lafayette, he was like, you know, he got really like hyped up in Hamilton, and, you know, people like him, and he was like in the American Revolution, yada yada. But this was a moment that kind of earned him a lot of respect for me, was the way that he handled this whole situation, which was that he was like in charge of the National Guard,
And the National Guard just kind of like gets up and leaves, and they're like, hey, dude, we are actually gonna go join the protesters. And Lafayette, he's still loyal to the king, but he kind of makes this decision where he's like, okay, if I stand down and let the National Guard go on their own, who knows what's gonna happen? So he basically makes the choice that says, all right, I am going to go with my men and I am going to accompany them to Versailles so that as this all unfolds, I can try to keep like some kind of sense of order to it and like try to prevent this situation from escalating and just getting worse for everybody. And he actually, like, when he shows up, in Louis's chambers, he basically tells him at first, before he concocts this whole plan about, like, go to the balcony and tell them how much you love them and maybe they won't kill you. But he basically shows up at Louis and is like, hey, shit's real bad, but I am ready to die with you if that's what's gonna happen. Like, I'll go through with this. With just props for him for for having that kind of dedication and just that kind of like level-headedness and chill. I love that you can just see through the window into my notes as I'm looking at them. Hilarious. Cannot wait for more Antiquity. Yes, Antiquity. It never ends. There's just so much good stuff there. Like, between, I still want to do Sextus Pompeius, who's, like, got these real, like, is it Euron Greyjoy vibes, where he's like, yes, I am king of the sea. I may not be a big player. I may just kind of have my own little territory going on here, but I am just, like, a badass sea captain. I still want to do Cicero. Like, I still want to do some stuff from, like, the Roman Republic or even, like, the Roman Kingdom, because that's some stuff that doesn't get talked about. There's, like, Camillus is there. There's Cincinnatus as well, of course. Second king, so everyone knows about Romulus, but his successor, Numa, is actually a really cool dude who's, like, Romulus is, like, the very, warlike and, yes, I am big and strong and will conquer the world. Whereas Numa is the other side of Rome, where he's very like, yes, I am a philosopher and a wise sage who thinks about things, who's just, very, who also, like, established the Vestal Virgins and all of these other things. Who's Boat King. Yes, Boat King. Boat King. That's what he's called. Elizabeth Calvert says, I gotta go due to tiny human bath time. Gotta binge your vids in chronological order for a few days. Still love them. Keep being awesome. Oh, thank you so much. I'm sorry, I'm sure that you've left by this point, but I have seen your message eventually. Good luck with tiny human bath time. The chronological, I was super surprised to find that someone had made that chronological order playlist. I thought that was super cool. If you haven't seen it, someone put that all together, and I, like, pinned that to my channel page, where it's just all chronological order, and it's really interesting. You really get a sense of, like, what time periods I'm familiar with and what time periods I'm obsessed with, and, like, places in the world and things like that. But it also is really cool in the sense that, like, if there's multiple videos on the same time period, but, like, slightly different perspectives, like, that I made years apart, it's cool to see, like, oh, that's how this person ties in with this person. It's all connected. It's almost like this is one great big cinematic universe. Joy says, Boat King bottom text. Zephyrus, read SPQR recently, and it talked quite a bit about the kings. Interesting stuff. Always a big fan of Augustus and his 3 billion personas over his lifetime. Yeah, no kidding. Augustus, for a long time, and still to a certain extent, I, like, never really got all the hype behind Augustus, and I forget what it was that actually kind of, like, flipped the switch for me a little bit, where it's kind of like, oh, okay, I see why people are so into him now. Because for a long time, I only really knew him as Octavian. I'm like, oh yeah, Augustus, that's the guy who is, like, happened to be related to Caesar and then somehow just like worked that connection until he became emperor, and there just weren't enough people around to really challenge him. But I think I have like some more respect. I think it was probably when I was like doing the not the Tiberius video, the Sejanus video, and like researching a lot about Tiberius, and over that course of research learning a little bit more about Augustus as an emperor and being like, oh, okay, this guy's got like something behind him. And he really was like trying to, well, not like, oh, he was just trying to mend a system. He was, a perfect little good boy doing good things for the world because he was so kind. But he did effectively solve a lot of the issues with the Roman Republic in one way or another, and did a lot of good for the society of Rome, which is all pretty impressive. So I feel like I see him more in that sense, where I give him credit, as opposed to like, the great emperor, magnificent, brave, powerful, yada, yada, yada. Still looking at Jade Thomas's, not supremacy, Call of War comments. What can I say? Running across half the world to go fight somebody. Just I didn't really want to leave my borders open like that. Zephyrus says, "Yeah, same kind of story for me. Gradual appreciation." Yeah, I think that's fair. But as far as like really cool Romans go, there's a lot of them out there. Like I feel like I feel bad that Augustus is like the one that everybody knows about, because like, oh man, if you just like, if only you knew about some of these only other people, if only you knew about Boat King. Ooh, okay, I gotta get to the flight to Varennes, because that was actually very cool. Well, that's very loud. I think it's slightly quieter for you because I changed some settings, but I'm still going to turn that down.
They're inside the palace!
Come to Paris! Your Majesty, if you wish it, I am here to die with you, but I have a plan. Full screen's having some issues. There we go.
Boy, move the kid so we can shoot you. The people of Paris, we hear you.
Oh, I think someone from the crowd actually said something about, like, get the kids out of the way, like, we're going to kill you now.
And we will go to Paris. Your words, they move me. Long live the king! Long live the king!
Long live the king!
Long live the king!
Long live the king! And, again, this is Lafayette basically playing both sides, and being like, oh, amazing. Look, people, look how great the king is. This was also sort of the last time, I think Marie Antoinette also had a moment here where, the people were like really touched by it and by her and, what she was saying, and being like, oh yes, long live the queen. And, that public favor did not last long.
Long live the king! Long live the king!
At this point, and more little animation details of like the kid not going over with them and getting stuck with Lafayette.
The king!
I don't know where the best place to talk about this would be, but this kid, who I think was another Louis, I want to say this was like Louis the 17th, who never really became king. But anyway, they at some point separated him from his mother, Marie Antoinette, and he was essentially like raised and pseudo-indoctrinated into like revolutionary ideals and stuff like that, to the point where when they wanted to execute Marie Antoinette, they basically told this kid, yeah, no, your mother is a terrible person and she's done horrible things to you. And they just kind of like, they told him to like make up all of this stuff about her. So at her trial, she was getting accused of like some really messed up things that she had supposedly done to her own son, and her son was the one accusing her of them. And it was all like kind of fabricated. But you know, they just needed something that they could say that she did to kill her, which is brutal. Like, as much as Louis got the short end of the stick, Marie's stick may have been shorter. It was like a real rough case for her, especially like, you know, she married into all of this. Like, oh man, the ways her life could have gone if she hadn't gotten married to the King of France.
Long live the king! Long live the king!
At this point, the king kind of disappears while under house arrest in Paris, but it's said that, I did not do this all the way. I didn't get it all the way across the image. What a embarrassing fluke. That when he arrived and I didn't do the little wipe all the way, that's what it's called. In the city, he came to visit an old, dilapidated palace and sat a while in its library, rummaging through its wise and dusty tomes to consult with the written memory of England's decapitated monarch. Meanwhile, this was another part that I had to run through somebody, because I think originally I just said, like, oh, Charles I, and assumed that everyone would, like, get the comparison, and then I was like, oh, yeah, no, I probably should mention that, like, the guy was also decapitated. While the people of Paris were whipped up into a frenzy by guillotine enthusiast Maximilien Robespierre, not only had Louis lost, there was also... Oh, the name of this, like, sort of rundown palace was the Tuileries, spelled in kind of an interesting way. It basically... It, at the time, was very run down, and the book I was reading just had a great description of, you know, this moment that I kind of... This was a thing that I thought about animating this moment, because it was just very kind of powerful for me, of Louis, you know, sitting there amidst sort of the ruins of, of what his family had left behind. And that palace, they obviously then renovated it, and it is also the same place where the 10th of August, I forget what year, and there was another big battle. The place of it was the place of like two of the most important uprisings of the French Revolution ended up taking place in that palace, and one of them was like not even like when Louis was there. It was like, you know, the French government, the Republic, the Assembly ended up occupying that space. And then they also get to share Louis's fate of being stuck in the palace and being like, uh-oh, looks like we ended up on the wrong side of the revolution, boys. With the written memory of England's decapitated monarch. Meanwhile, the people of Paris were whipped up into a frenzy by guillotine enthusiast Maximilien Robespierre. Not only had Louis lost the support of the lawmakers and the goodwill of the people, he's completely lost his grip on the army. So if the French army... This was also, I think, using baguettes to represent the French people has to be one of the favorite ideas of the guy that helps me find images of his. That was magnifique. Army won't fight for him. Maybe the Austrian army will. After all, they don't want their people getting any ideas, and it would be great if their new ally wasn't too busy fighting itself. The royal family sneaks out a back entrance while Lafayette is supposed to be guarding them, and this is called the Flight to Varennes, and it could have been a video all on its own. Like, there was a whole bunch of stuff that happened here, and I forget if it was like a couple chapters in a book or if it was a book itself, but there was just a lot of information about this that I found, and I hope I have some of it written down. I'm going to play through a little bit more first, just to make sure I'm not repeating myself. And makes it to the countryside, but just before they can make it to the Austrian border, somebody recognizes Louis because his face is on their money. Louis gets hauled back to Paris. Okay, yeah, no, that's basically all that got in here. There's just so much drama that happened with this because, of course, you've got Lafayette, and there's more character drama there, and, you know, his relationship with the king and failing to serve the people, and yada yada yada. But like, I think he dressed up as a merchant. I'm sure you can see my notes because they're getting shown through the video. He dressed up as a merchant. They were kind of pretending to be, you know, Russian nobility, and someone ended up finding him because, you know, they'd never seen him before in their life, and obviously the internet didn't exist, but when your face is on the money that everyone in the country uses, people start recognizing you. And there's just this, like, a whole bunch of drama that happens where they get, like, someone sees them, right? And they're kind of holding them there and being like, oh, hey, hold up, you know, don't go past here. Louis is trying to be, you know, pretend that he is just somebody traveling with someone more important. He's like, no, this random person from my household, they're the important person, and I am just some merchant traveling with them. And there's like all of these big moments of like, well, that's the king. Like, what do we do? Like, can we stop the king? Can we just tell the king that just to stop? And then, you know, they get hauled back, and it's kind of like, well, what do we do while we're waiting for, you know, and it wasn't the Republic at this point, but while we're waiting for, like, you know, the army of the people to show up, there's the question of, you know, does Louis just make a run for it? Does he, like, try to bring in the Austrians? Does he try to, like, send word? Does he try to, like, get hold of some of these mercenaries? There's just, like, this insane amount of tension going on in, like, a grocery store in some tiny backwater village, that is just fabulous. God, I wish I could have spent more time on it. That's another way in which this video kind of exploded out of control. And of course, they ended up blaming Lafayette. Every time I look back at chat, I see more people discussing how to create the calendar of Louis. Sean MG. See, Sean MG, I see a bunch of your comments just because your profile picture is so colorful. The last Chinese emperor, you mean Yuan Shikai? Or were you the one? Someone was telling me that I needed to. I think it was Yuan Shikai, the guy who's like the dog meat general. Someone was telling me I needed to look into him, and I still haven't done too much research on it. Ooh. Comment from Having Fun saying, I heard another version of them being caught was because Marie's perfume was so strong. Has anyone heard that one before? I had not heard that before, but that is a very interesting idea. That, huh. Lasts and firsts are people I make a lot of videos about because they always tend to have at least somewhat entertaining stories. You know, like the first Ming Emperor, or actually I didn't do the first Mughal Emperor. I did the second one, but he kind of, you know, had to restart it on his own. Usually a good story there. One person that I've wanted to do a story on for a long time is the last Byzantine emperor. Like Constantine the 14th or something like that, who, just because he has this so dramatic ending where, you know, they're fighting and like the walls of Constantinople are coming down, and he's being told, like, you know, sir, we have to run, we have to get out of here, we have to do something, and he just like turns around and like stares them dead in the eyes and is like, you know, if Constantinople is going to fall, then I shall fall with it. And he like goes through the breached hole in the wall and like charges into the Ottoman army and is never seen again. And is just so like the stuff of legends. You know, such a cinematic moment. But the thing that has stopped me from making a video about him is because I feel like it would be so difficult to make a video about him without like having, like, I would be so desperate to like show the proper build up to show just how much weight is sitting on him. I'm like, how can I possibly make a video on Constantine the 11th without making a series on the entire history of Rome beforehand. Like, just wanting to convey that, like, this is 2,000 years of history going out with this dude in a blaze of glory. And, of course, you know, the yada yada poetic, like, the West began and end with Romulus, and the East shall begin and end with Constantine. It's just so good. Paris on charges of treason, which he thinks is ridiculous, but that defense didn't work out so well for England's Charles I. This is, oh god, what's the name of the channel that I'm thinking of? I want to say Invicta, but I think I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure that's not the right one. Anyway, there's another channel that made a whole video on the trial of Charles I. Yeah, Invicta is definitely someone else. That was another, like, really good piece of character drama. Whereas, you know, they usually do a lot of stuff about, like, battles and things like that. But there was this whole argument about, like, how can a king commit treason, and trying to set up the legal precedent for taking power away from kings and effectively creating the idea of, like, you know, a constitutional monarch is, in what ways can a king betray his country? Because the thinking was, for the longest time, is like, the king is the country, you know, the king owns the country. He can't commit treason against himself. And so there was all of this, you know, really interesting technical ways in which they had to, like, phrase it to be like, no, Your Highness, actually, you have committed treason against the people. Meanwhile, Lafayette is held responsible for letting the king escape. Robespierre marks him a traitor. People start throwing stones at the National Guard, and the National Guard opens fire, killing 13 to 50 people, so Lafayette just accidentally did a Boston Massacre. The Holy Roman Emperor and the King of Prussia issue a threat saying that if anything happens to Louis, the French had better watch out, and oh boy, that did not make the situation better. It was really just an incidental little thing they said while they were partitioning Poland again, but those were fighting words. So even though you've got France's finest diplomats out trying to prevent war, France fired. This was a scene that ended up being animated a little differently from what I was imagining, but I do love the looks on their faces. I want to say this is like William Pitt, who was the Prime Minister of England at the time. I think, maybe. Video on an English Prime Minister would also be kind of an interesting thing to look into. Let me know if this is too quiet, by the way. I feel like I've lowered the volume a number of times so that I can potentially speak over it and so that the loud parts aren't too loud, but if it's a problem, let me know. First, because they didn't plan on hurting their king, but damn it, they'll fight like hell to defend their right to hurt him if they want to. The Prussian-Austrian army, oh my god, Prussia and Austria on the same side of a war, cats and dogs living together. They end up doing really well at first, but they did. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong. Declare their intention to restore Louis to full power, and that right there is his death sentence. He's found guilty of conspiracy and sentenced to immediate execution by one vote. Okay, this was something that caused some controversy in the comments and people trying to correct me, because all this stuff about, like, Louis being executed by one vote by his cousin. The way that it happened was the first vote, I think, was between, like, three choices. It was something like, for the sake of example, do we kill him now? Do we kill him later? Or do we kill him under certain conditions? Or do we let him go? And it was clear, like, it was by more than one vote that kill him now was the most popular. But they ended up, like, having an appeal, and that appeal was, oh god, I want to say it was between, like, you know, do we kill him now or do we let him go? And that one was more popular. Hold on, now I have to actually look this up, because it was somehow in this whole, like, chain of appeals and recounts. That was when it ended up being like, okay, do we kill him now or do we kill him later? Or something like that. And it ended up being just one vote that made the difference.
I don't know why I'm looking here when I'm sure I've got it in my notes. Okay, that was it. Because so they first did guilty or innocent, and everybody voted guilty. So then, 288 of the deputies voted against death and for some other alternative, mainly imprisonment or exile. 72 voted for the death penalty, but subject to several delaying conditions and reservations. 361 voted for his immediate execution. He was condemned to death by a majority of 1 vote. And then, the next day, a motion to grant him reprieve from the death sentence was voted down. 310 requested mercy, 380 voted for immediate execution. Okay, that was what it was. It was that very, very slightly, like by 1 vote, because 361 out of 721 is a majority by 1 vote. So it was 1 vote that said, kill him right now immediately. There were other people that wanted to kill him, and everybody, was going to punish him in one sense or another. But it was ironic that the person that killed him, his cousin there, ended up also getting guillotined. And I'm sure in chat right now there's people correcting me. No, I'm just seeing a lot of emotes about France. Oh, Historia Civilis. Yes, gosh, sorry. I'm familiar with that channel and I've seen a number of his videos, but the name totally went out of my head. Long live the king, unless Austria likes him. William Pitt the Younger. Blackadder. William Pitt was in Blackadder? Huh. Oh, someone's asking about the last words. I will get to those in a second. We will get there shortly. Citizen Capet is marched to the scaffold and tells the people, "I hope at last I may make you happy, even if it is with my blood. But when 1 can be sacrificed for the many, why not 2, or 3, or 10? Little by little, we will find reasons for sacrificing the many for the happiness of the many, and we will think it was a bargain." Little sound of his head hitting the floor after it gets chopped off. So those aren't exactly his last words. That is sort of a paraphrasing of his last words. I think that it's even on Wikipedia or something. Yeah. So some of that was lifted directly. Like the little by little we'll find reasons for sacrificing the many. The rest of it was sort of condensed a little bit. The original quote here, getting pulled from Princeton University Press, is, "If we accept the proposition that 1 person can be sacrificed for the happiness of the many, it will soon be demonstrated that 2 or 3 or more could also be sacrificed for the happiness of the many." So that part I just kind of put into my own words a little bit, made it slightly shorter. I didn't want to spend, too long on him just speaking, because, time is money. Animation costs a bit to produce. But yeah, those are the last words there. And that, I think, is going to be where we will end for today. I'm trying to look at all of this recap and being like, okay, what have I missed? What have I not talked about that I actually learned the first time? There's the stuff about Poland that ended up causing the French Revolution, or causing Louis's execution. Which is funny because it was totally just about something different originally, I think. Maybe this is only talking about French Revolution. What was the bit about Poland? Huh. Well, that doesn't look great. Anyway, this is what happens when I don't have all my sources and stuff pulled up in front of me. Anyway, I think that we will also hold this to be continued. Holstor Sadus saying, "This channel is basically Historia Uncivilis." Yeah, nice.
I think we will continue this a little bit later. I didn't realize this was going to take an hour and 45 minutes to go through the first video, because normally on Patreon it's, like about as long as the videos themselves. We will do the next video at some point, and then we'll do another stream for the last video. And hey, this way I get to come up with more content without actually having to think of things, because it's kind of hard to have like interesting, original, history-themed streaming ideas. Yakov Mankas asks, I'm interested in your opinion on using Wikipedia for your videos. Wikipedia is like a fine place to start. It's also like the stuff that's on Wikipedia is going to be, unless it's like citation needed. You always want to make sure that there's a little number there at the end of the thing, but it's usually going to give you the gist of things, and it'll give you sort of the parts that everyone agrees upon. I wouldn't, use it too much for like very specific things, but it gives you a jumping off point, and it's a great place to find other books. I feel like that's kind of the default stand on Wikipedia. Anyway, hope you all have a great rest of your day. This was fun to do a little stream again, and I will see you all later. Cheers.